We're going to try something a little different tonight. In addition to tech support puppy, who's right here, we've got the technical assistant, Joey, who is like me. He's a senior, so I don't know how much help he's going to be. But they're they're right here, running around. So if there's any disruptions tonight, it's because I brought 2 dogs instead of 1. I'm officially outnumbered 2 to 1. But looks like we got Joe. He's just gonna be like that, I think. We have so much to cover tonight that I'm just gonna go. We've got a couple more folks that are set to join us, but I've got it set so they can just pop on in. I left the door open so they can let themselves in. We're gonna jump into some screen sharing for tonight. With our slideshow that, of course, starts off with our and from there, we're actually going to play a little bit of catch up from the last couple of weeks of columns. Last week, I got so excited talking about the Upper Peninsula, Michigan, that we didn't really get a chance to talk about too many other things. But I wanted to start off with a recap from the week before last column, which was about the trials and tribulations of juvenile raptors and specifically red-tailed hawks. Right after, actually it was right as we were building Hickory Knolls, I remember talking to one of our Parks Department employees and telling me about how there was a number of there's a lot of activity going on as they were building the Otter Cove swimming pool. He said, you know, it really disrupted quite a bit of the wildlife over there. They're digging this big hole, and then they put this pool in, and animals that had always foraged around there when that was soccer fields, they were having to adjust their habits. Well, there was a red-tailed hawk that used to hang out there, and it would walk around and it would scavenge for earthworms that were overturned as part of the excavation of the pool. And I thought that was kind of strange, and I didn't realize that hawks ate worms, but it's just one more method of survival that these guys resort to, especially in their early years. I mentioned in the column that really it's between 1 out of 2 and 2 out of 3 red-tailed hawks do not survive their first year. There's a lot of different threats that face them as they are getting through that first year. The main thing is experience, and that's something I always think of that when I see, you know, a young person behind the wheel of a, you know, they're just learning how to drive. They're so 16 years old is what the law says you need to be able to drive. It doesn't mean that you've got the experience and the wisdom that's needed to handle that car safely. And it's kind of the same thing with our young raptors. They are mature in the sense that they've reached their adult size, but they still have a lot of growing up to do in terms of survival. So that first year is kind of tough, and so a lot of them do not survive. We'll go back to that slide. Let's go back. This is a young red-tailed hawk cruising over some low grasses. The reason we know it's a young hawk, there's a couple different things we can look at. Of course, red-tailed hawks are famous for their red tail, but that first year, until they go through that first year and go through their first major molt, they don't have a red tail. Their tail has these narrow bands on it. Their eye color, too, is a giveaway. A young hawk is going to have a lighter colored eye. As they get older, that eye becomes darker, and a fully mature red-tailed hawk is going to have a reddish tail on the top, back. and it's going to have darker eyes. So here we've got a few pictures. We've got, this is that same hawk starting to take off. Again, you can tell it's young by the light colored eyes. Here in the lower left, we have a mature red-tailed hawk. The light is coming through and it's highlighting those red tail feathers on the end, those namesake feathers. And then here's a mature hawk showing that dark eye. As they get older, they do get that dark eye. And we know it's a red tail, even if it doesn't have the red tail, because one is the when they're flying, they're going to have these markings up here, little, almost like little wristbands up on the underside of their wings. And they're also going to have this characteristic marking across the belly. Now, when I was first learning about these hawks, I don't know, probably 20 some years ago, someone described that to me as the Charlie Brown zigzag across the belly. And so I always think of that whenever I'm looking at these hawks. Some of our other hawks around here, and probably our other most common one is a Cooper's hawk. And they, the young birds, they're going to have a more narrow, what am I trying to say? A sleeker sort of a build. The red tails, they're beefier. Red tails tend to specialize in eating small mammals like squirrels, ground squirrels, chipmunks, those types of things. Although they'll eat a bird if they can catch one, but they're not designed to turn on a dime the way our exhibitors or our bird hunting hawks are. Those would be the Cooper's hawks, the sharp-shinned hawks, birds like that that have just a sleeker sort of a build and a longer tail. Red tail is a chunkier hawk. It's a buteo, which is a different group of hawks as opposed to the accipiters, which are the bird hunters. So let's see how you do. I'm going to show you some pictures, and I want you to see if you can guess if they are a mature red-tailed hawk or if they are an immature. Over here on the left, we have a bird with, well, let's see, we've got fairly dark eyes, and we've got the belly band, which is going to be there whether or not they're mature or not. And look at here, we've got some red colored feathers sticking out here at the tail. So would we all agree that this bird on the left is a mature red-tailed hawk?
Yes.
Good. Yes, indeed. Now, this one in the middle, let's look at it. Can't see the tail, but we can see the eyes. The eyes are dark. So this too, would we agree? That's a mature red-tailed hawk? I think so. And then 3, here we've got light eyes. We've got the bars on the tail, no red. So again, this is an immature. And it's funny, you know, we tend to think because humans, you know, an immature human is usually smaller than a mature human. But again, these guys, birds don't act that way. Birds don't grow that way. They attain their adult size very quickly. And it's only in subsequent years that they attain their adult plumage. I wanted to point out something else too. It's hard to see in the picture on the left and the picture on the right, but this picture in the middle really shows this off well. Hawks are daytime hunters, and so a lot of times they'll be out, they'll be in a field, or like this guy here in the center, he's on a utility pole, and if it's sunny out, they're going to be faced with the same problems we have in terms of glare. Now, we'll put on, as I usually do, some kind of a hat, or we'll hold our hand up to block the sun's rays from glaring into our eyes. But these hawks, they can't do that. But look at how their eyes are set. You can kind of see it here on this bird on the right too. Their eyes are deeper set, and they've got a ridge right above them that acts as a natural shade. Isn't that cool? You don't see that so much on the owls or birds of prey that are out at night, but the hawks, and it's particularly obvious in the red-tailed hawks, they've got a built-in visor with their eyes to help block the shade, block the sun, which I think is pretty cool. So what is it that gets these young birds? As I mentioned, maturity plays a big role in their survival. And knowing when to chase that rabbit across the road to avoid getting hit by a car is going to increase their chances of survival. Being able to recognize and avoid glass is another important survival skill. Surviving in a cold, long, cold, snowy winter is another skill. And in fact, even some mature birds have trouble with this one if the key word there is prolonged. They do have wonderful adaptations in terms of their eyesight and their ability to feed to the point where they can then go for a few days without feeding. So they can withstand a few days of cold and snow, but if we've got a blizzard combined with days and days of cold where their prey is not coming out to feed, times can get kind of tough for our red tails. Power lines, if they land on the line and they don't have to worry about completing a circuit and getting zapped, that's fine. But there are a fair number of birds, particularly young birds, that do get electrocuted landing on power lines. Some websites will list predation by feral cats as a factor in hawk survival. I don't know. This one I question a little bit, just because cats do kill a lot of birds, not just millions, but the estimates is in the billions of birds. Feral cats take a terrible toll on our, and actually not just feral cats, cats that are allowed to roam outside that have a home. They'll pester the birds, sometimes injuring them, sometimes killing them. I don't know about a cat going after a hawk, though. I question that, but you will find some sources that list cats as a reason for high mortality levels of hawks. I suppose maybe a very young bird, especially a hawk maybe that's fallen out of the nest too soon, could fall prey to a cat. But anyway, another big factor, and this isn't just the juveniles, but all the hawks, anything that eats rodents can become a victim of the mouse and rat baits that we use when we put them out in our garages and our sheds and our basements. Many of them have a delayed reaction. It causes the animal to become very thirsty, and they typically will then go off in search of water, oftentimes heading outside, and along comes a hawk or an owl. They see this sort of weakened little animal that they think, aha, this is going to be an easy meal for me. They consume that, and then they are also consuming the poison that little mouse has eaten. So sometimes one dose is enough to kill a bird. Sometimes they have to eat more than one, but rodenticides are a big factor and kind of a problem in the survival of our local birds of prey. Now, there's a facility up in Lake Forest. It's called the Wildlife Discovery Center. It's a neat place. In fact, it's known primarily for its large reptile collection. They have a lot of snakes, a lot of lizards. They've helped out with some of the stray alligators that have shown up in the Chicago area. In fact, they just finished their annual fundraiser called Croctoberfest. So it's a facility it's known primarily for its reptiles, but they also have outdoors several displays featuring birds of prey. And earlier this year, they came out with a publication on rodenticides. They suggested that people print it out and take it to local hardware stores and big box stores, places where people are buying their tomcat and their other, the brands of rat and mouse baits. I haven't done that yet, but I think I might do that. And if any of you would like a copy of this, it is available as a PDF. I'd be glad to email you a copy of it. Just let me know in the chat box if you want one, and I'll send it off to you. It's got a lot of good information in it. And it's pretty sobering, the effect that these poisons have on our birds of prey. So let's go on to something a little bit cheerier. Let's talk about turkey vultures.
Can I ask you one question about the hawks?
You bet.
Sometimes I see the hawks flying by, and then there's a whole bunch of red-winged blackbirds attacking them. Do they hurt it to the point of injuring it, or just drive them away?
Usually not. Usually the hawk, they just want to get the hawk to move on. That behavior, Silvana, is called mobbing. And crows do it to owls, red-winged blackbirds do it to hawks. In fact, I kind of blame the red-winged blackbirds for the number of ground squirrels that we have in the garden plots by Hickory Knolls. And the reason I do that is because we've got a pretty good population of red-winged blackbirds. And we do have a resident pair of red-tailed hawks. So you'd think that, there would be enough space for everybody, but the redwings really don't like it when the red tails come over to hunt at the garden plots, and they mob them and they shoo them away. So that kind of allows the ground squirrels to romp freely in those garden plots. Because the redwings are chasing away their main predator there, which is the red-tailed hawks. So yeah, it is something that they do. I don't know that any birds really get hurt by it. I was worried one time. I was at my mom's house, and there was a little screech owl in the hemlock tree she has in her backyard, and there were crows that were just harassing the heck out of this little screech owl, and they were getting really close to it, and it was wasn't really able to fly away. And I thought, gee, would they actually harm it? But then I did see where it kind of fluffed its wings up, and the crows backed off just enough to let the screech owl fly away. And of course, the crows chased it, but I think it was all going to end just fine. So it's, mobbing is a real common thing. In fact, sometimes turkey vultures get chased by them too. I've seen red-winged blackbirds chasing after these guys as well. Even though they're not technically birds of prey, turkey vultures, well, maybe, let's see. I'd have to look at the classifications again to see, but turkey vultures are eating dead stuff, not live stuff, so they don't typically pose a threat to small animals. But this is the time of year to see turkey vultures in pretty good sized groups as they're heading south. They are not super long distance migrators. They just want to get to where it's a little bit warmer, and they're the kind of bird that has the same approach to the day as I do. They are not typically early risers. They tend to let the air warm up and let their bodies warm up. What we're looking at here in this photo is birds that are spreading their dark wings out to maximize the way they can, that those dark feathers can absorb the sun's rays. They also, sometimes they get a little damp in the trees overnight. They can have dew settling on them. So that behavior of spreading their wings out will also help dry the dew off. I thought this was a neat picture. Now, I did not take this picture. This was a photo, file photo that we had gotten through the newspaper, but you'll notice we've got some mature birds which have the red skin on their heads, and turkey vultures are somewhat famous for their feather-free heads. When you think about how they make their living, which is eating dead stuff, having feathers is just going to make for a smelly mess. So keeping their heads clean by not having feathers, it's a big advantage to having that bald head. But we'll see, we've got mostly mature birds here, but we've got a couple of younger birds too that have not yet gotten their red heads. A first year turkey vulture is going to have a dark head. Now, farther down in Illinois, in southern Illinois, we do also have the black vulture. And black vultures do not have red heads. They have black heads. And there can be some confusion when you're downstate as to whether you're looking at a black vulture or turkey vulture. But up here, I'm not aware of any black vultures that have ever come up this far north. So this is a family group that includes adults and also immature versions of the birds. So when they're flying up in the sky, they can sometimes be hard to see that red head. And they're a big bird. Their wingspan can approach 6 feet, which is the same size as a bald eagle. So when you see them up in the sky flying around, a couple of different giveaways that you might be looking at turkey vultures as opposed to eagles is one, their numbers. This time of year, our eagles might be in their pairs. The youngster, I know, like with the mooseheart eagles, they had one little eaglet this year, and it still is in the vicinity of the parents, but you don't see big groups of eagles at this time of year. That happens later on in the winter. But we are seeing pretty large groups of turkey vultures. After last week's column ran, I got this picture on the left. This was taken down at Clark Island in Batavia. This is a group of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 turkey vultures sunning themselves. This was late morning. I think it was taken around 11 o'clock in the morning. They took off, and the person who sent me this photo said that he thought that they looked kind of like eagles. But over here on the right, you can see there's a big difference in how these birds hold their wings. An eagle, when it's soaring in the sky, its wings go straight across. Turkey vultures have more of a V shape to their wings. Turkey vultures they tend to circle quite a bit. They'll soar, they'll hold this posture for long periods of time. And what they're doing is they're taking advantage of the warming air currents called thermals that will drive them up high into the sky. That's going to enable them to catch the whiffs that they need to be able to scent and smell where something dead might be lying, because that is the majority of their diet. They might eat a few bugs here and there. They might eat a little bit of grain here and there, but for the most part, these guys are scavengers. In fact, their scientific name is Cathartes aura, and Cathartes means, of course, catharsis or cleansing, and aura, there's a couple of different explanations for that. One is from the word for gold, oro, so a golden cleanser is one explanation. The other one, aura, can also mean breeze. I believe that's the Greek interpretation of it. So cleansing creature that rides on the breezes is another way to look at the interpretation of their scientific names. But look up, these guys are coming through right now, and if you're lucky, you might see a nice big group of them. They tend to follow the Fox River, as so many of our migrating birds do, so that's a good spot to look at them. But I did get a call. It wasn't this year, it was a couple of years ago. There was a woman who was completely freaked out. She lived probably a good mile away from the river, and she had 13 turkey vultures perched on the peak of her garage. And she thought, what did I do to earn this honor? And it turns out they were just resting. They didn't stay long. They were on their way the next morning. But like I said, the river is good, but just our general King County location is, there's lots of good chances for you to observe these turkey vultures as they make their way south. Now, I did mention they don't go terribly far south. There's some that will stay in southern Illinois. it's generally thought that a lot of our Illinois birds might go down here into the southeast. But you can see in this range map that southern Illinois is part of the year-round range for some of the birds. And they're also a bird that's on the increase. They are growing, the population in Illinois is growing at about 12% a year, according to the Illinois Natural History Survey. I didn't see exact reasons, and at this point it's probably, nobody can say precisely why this is happening, but a couple of theories are, one, they are in general expanding their range northward. The Natural History Survey records show that they didn't come any farther north than Marion, Illinois, which is down south, southern part of the state, 100 years ago. And 50 years ago, they weren't really seen north of Peoria. So they are expanding their range, and that may have to do with our changing climate. But we've also, in the last 100 or even in the last 50 years, greatly expanded our highway system. And with more roads comes more cars, and with more cars comes more roadkill, and more roadkill means there's more food for this bird that specializes in eating dead things. So it's kind of nice in the face of so much gloom and doom in terms of bird populations that are decreasing. It's nice to hear that there's at least one species that's doing quite well, and that's our turkey vultures. In fact, they are doing so well that they have their own festival. This is down in Makanda, Illinois. If you've ever been down to southern Illinois, there's a wonderful state park down there called Giant City. And the main entrance into Giant City State Park is at Makanda. Makanda is also home to our former Senator Paul Simon, the late Paul Simon. It's an interesting little town. It is very small. It's not too far from Carbondale. So it's got a bit of a cultural influence. There's a shop down there. I believe it's still there. It's called the Rainmaker, and he's a metal sculptor. Does a lot of statuary out of different types of metals. Real character. His name's Dave. His shop is over here at this end of this is the famous Makanda Boardwalk. Vulture Fest, in normal years, it would be coming up this weekend, but they did cancel the 2020 version. It's held the third weekend in October. You'd think it would be celebrating vultures because there's a lot of vultures, both the turkey vultures that are migrating, the turkey vultures that live down there, and then the black vultures, because southern Illinois, as I mentioned before, is home to a lot of black vultures. Let's just say in October, there's a lot of vultures in Makanda. But the festival, it's kind of their equivalent of our Scarecrow Fest up here. There's a few random vulture references around the town, signs and things like that. But they also have a craft show, and they've got food booths. They've got a lot of music, live entertainment going on. And it's just a kind of a fun way to spend a weekend celebrating vultures. So keep that in mind for future years. The third weekend in October, if you're looking for something to do, head on down to Makanda. I know they'd love to see you. They're real friendly down there. When I grabbed this photo, I saw something else that I thought was interesting. If you're looking to invest at all, part of this legendary Makanda Boardwalk is for sale. The LL Bell building is for sale. The price wasn't available, but it's got rental units up above, one bedroom apartments, 3 bathrooms, and then it's got retail down below. So if you're looking to, diversify your portfolio, you might want to check out. This is really the heart and soul of the Makanda Boardwalk is right there. You could own it and call it your very own. Anyway, I digress. Last week when we were talking about the Upper Peninsula, I said there's a few more things we didn't get to, and one of them is the pasty. The tie-in here was last week we also talked about the Back 40 mine, which is a big threat to the pristine ecology of the Menominee River in the southeastern UP. Well, pasties were brought to this country by the Cornish miners in the 1840s. So this mine connection continues, but in a much better light. Last week I was getting kind of down on, mining and the destruction that it can cause to the environment. But pasties are something that if you ever get a chance to travel north, this is a UP delicacy. The classic filling is beef, rutabaga, potatoes, and onions. And this was a food that was, it came over to this country from the miners from Cornwall. And they had created it because it's something that was very portable. This is before we had really sliced bread even, before we had lunch boxes. The guys would take these meat pies with them into the mines. And the way this is designed, this is my friend Bonnie's pasty from our vacation. See how it's rolled here, this crust? This is a handle. And when you think about the business of mining, and especially the old ways of mining, there was a lot of toxic materials that these guys were handling. And when it came to time for lunch, it wasn't like they could just go wash their hands. So they would hold on to their pasty by this outside crust here, and then they could throw that part away and they wouldn't eat the contamination that their grimy hands had gotten onto that crust. So, if you find yourself traveling north and you find yourself in Menominee, Michigan, stop by Colonel K's. I swear this is completely unsolicited. They're not sponsoring this week's program or anything, but best pasties around can be found at Colonel K's. I learned as I was doing a little bit of research about this delicacy that up in the UP, a 7-course meal is a pasty and a 6-pack. So keep that in mind too, if you happen to be lucky enough to head north.
I went to the Upper Peninsula by Munising, but the Picture Rocks, and they have them there. And we tried the beef one. They also have the apple one that is like an apple pie wrapped all around. It was delicious.
Oh, that sounds fantastic, Sylvan. I didn't know that it would vary that way. I heard, so when we picked ours up, they said that some people eat them with ketchup and some people put gravy on them, but they didn't say anything about a dessert pasty.
I had no idea about it. And the little place is like, like an ice cream place, but it's only the pasties. And I was going to ask you last week, but I didn't know how to pronounce it because I always forget. But yeah, we tried the beef one and it had like potatoes inside. It's delicious. But then the apple one, it was, oh, my kids love that stuff.
Oh, well, now I got to go back. But, and yeah, that is the thing. The saying up there is pasty rhymes with nasty, not pasty rhymes with tasty. So, yeah, if you get a chance, give it a try. It's kind of, kind of like a pot pie, but you can pick it up and hold it. The crust is sturdy enough to hold it because, again, it dates back to that era of mining when guys had to take their food with them. And it could actually fit inside their mining helmet, so it stayed kind of warm too as they were working. Probably got kind of salty too if they were working hard. But anyway, keep that in mind if you're lucky enough to travel north. And we're gonna keep on with this food theme for a few more slides because October is hen of the woods season. Now, last week, again, when we were talking about being up in the UP, I think I mentioned that I spent quite a bit of time looking for this mushroom here. This is a hen of the woods mushroom, and this was actually hen of the woods that I had found a couple of years ago at Hickory Knolls. I put my lip balm there so you can get a sense of the size of it. These things are bowling ball size, sometimes basketball size even. They're a really large mushroom, and there's not really anything that it can be mistaken for. Eating a mushroom can be a very risky proposition if you don't know what you're doing. I don't tend to know what I'm doing. There's only a few mushrooms that I'll trust myself on, but this is one of them. And it's hen of the woods season right now. I was really hopeful that we'd get a little bit more rain yesterday because those October rains really caused these mushrooms to come out and to flourish. I don't know if it was quite enough. I'm going to do some checking again this week to see if I can maybe have some luck. But I didn't find any up in the UP, and it occurred to me later that down here, we find hen of the woods growing at the base of white oak trees. And up where we were walking around, there were red oaks, a lot of different kinds of red oaks, but didn't see any white oaks and didn't see any hen of the woods. You might see reference in health food stores to this mushroom because it's also known as maitake. It's got a lot of purported health benefits. It's got some strong anti-cancer properties. You can buy it dried. You can buy it as a powder. It's a pretty famous type of mushroom, and it grows right here in Kane County. So I began my search, as I said, up in the UP. I wasn't lucky enough to find any up there. I came back home, and I had to go to a meeting at the Potawatomi Community Center. And after my meeting was over, I headed out, and I came out the front door here, and I was walking along the building, and I see at the end of the parking lot here this oak tree. There's a different view of it. I didn't take these photos. I just grabbed these off our website, but this oak tree here is surrounded by, as you can see here, a lot of mulch, a lot of wood chips. Well, what do I see growing at the base of that white oak tree in the parking lot at the Potawatomi Community Center, but a hen of the woods mushroom? I was over the moon. I went back in, not surprisingly, nobody had a problem with me picking it. Nobody had their eye on it. You can see in comparison to the slide, the picture from a couple of slides ago, this one had started to dry out a little bit. It's quite dark on the edges, and the fronds here were starting to curl a little bit. But it was still very edible. I cut into it a little bit, and you can see the white underneath. As long as it's white and it smells good, or I should say it doesn't smell bad. You know, it has a kind of a mushroomy smell to it, and if you don't like mushrooms, you're not going to like the smell. But as long as it doesn't smell as if it's starting to rot, it's still good. And as long as that flesh inside is white and firm, you'll be just fine. So I sliced it off the tree and got a plastic bag from Michelle at the front desk. She's always good to help me out with my weird little nature adventures. And I lugged this thing home. It was like carrying a bowling ball. I would say this thing weighed about 8 pounds. I walked it back to the office, and I've been eating on it pretty much ever since. That was last Wednesday. And not to sound like Forrest Gump, but I've had sauteed mushrooms. I've had grilled mushrooms. I've had stir-fried mushrooms. I've had, the other morning I had mushrooms and eggs. I had mushrooms and mixed vegetables. I've had mushrooms and pasta. I've still got enough that I've got a tray of it spread out in the freezer that I will bag up and use another time. And then I've got one more jar of the slightly tougher inner part of the mushroom that I'm going to try boiling and making a broth with. So Mushroom Fest is happening over at Casa Otto. And my hope is to maybe find one more before the season ends. We'll have to see. I should also add that it's also chicken of the woods season. So there's hen of the woods, and then there's chicken of the woods. And chicken of the woods, I have yet to try. Now, some people have told me you got to be a little careful, maybe start by eating a small amount because it doesn't always sit with you. But one of my coworkers here at the Park District, Ryan Solomon, on our restoration team, he prefers this one to hen of the woods. He says the texture is much more chicken-like, and he says it's got it tastes like chicken. Hen of the woods, I think it has a very good flavor. I wouldn't necessarily say it tastes like chicken, but Ryan says that chicken of the woods actually tastes like chicken. Now, this mushroom too grows at the base of oak trees, but it grows on other trees as well. And you got to be kind of careful. If it's growing at the base of a conifer, say a pine tree, you don't want to eat it because it absorbs some of the, I don't know if it's the resins or some sort of chemicals from conifers like pines and spruce, and it won't kill you, but it'll make you wish you were dead. So you don't want to eat a chicken of the woods that was growing on a conifer. Now this particular one, this was a black cherry tree. This picture was sent to me by Lisa O'Brien in our naturalist department. I asked her if she picked it and she didn't answer me. So I don't think she did. I would have, but this is another mushroom. It's pretty common and pretty easy to identify. And from what I hear, pretty tasty. So if I'm lucky enough to find one in the next week, I'll give a report on that as well. So while I was rambling around Potawatomi that day, I thought I would check some of the other trees in the park to see if there were any other signs of mushrooms coming up. I did actually see a couple that I think had already been picked, the remains of some at the base of some of the oak trees at Potawatomi. And I don't want to diverge too much from our next topic here, but there are some legalities with mushroom collecting. I know the Forest Preserve District does not allow people to pick mushrooms on any of their parks. Our policy at the Park District too kind of says you're supposed to leave everything in place, but I know with mushrooms, we tend to back off on that because it's not, there's not, you're not taking the actual growth, the bulk of the mushroom is actually underneath the ground. What you're taking away is the fruiting body. And a lot of times that doesn't disturb the ecology of the mushroom itself. So we're a little bit more lenient, but you cannot collect at the Forest Preserve District. You can, however, collect in state parks. State parks allow you to collect mushrooms, and you can also collect nuts and berries. So if you want to go off mushroom hunting, your best bet without any legalities at all, legal things getting in your way, would be to go to a state park. I'll also warn you though, there's a lot of competition. I don't know what COVID has done to people, but there's a lot of folks that are looking to sharpen their survival skills. I noticed this in the springtime too, when I was out looking for morels. There were a lot of people out there, more than usual, looking to find basically free food growing on trees. So anyway, keep that in mind. But if you want any more tips, shoot me an email and maybe we can go out hunting together. Anyway, let's move on. So as I'm walking around Potawatomi, this tree caught my eye. And I looked at it and I thought, what in the world is that? It doesn't look like anything native, nothing that I was familiar with at all. It vaguely reminded me of the open growth habit of, say, a redbud tree, but the leaves are all wrong and the branching was all wrong and it was way too big to be a redbud. So I walked over to it and I looked at the bark and I thought, bark doesn't look familiar either. And then I noticed that there was a lot of activity up in the branches. There were birds, there were robins, there were chickadees actually too that were gathering these berries. And I thought, now what tree could this be? And then I started thinking, right now the Park District is as a means of getting people, giving people something to do when we can't really program the way we normally would. We can't have large groups gathered together. There's a tree bingo activity that you can download a bingo card and you can go to different parks and you can take your picture with these different trees. And I think there's some sort of prize if you go to all the different trees. Anyway, I was looking down the list of the trees and there was a tree called a cork tree, which I'd never heard of. And I thought, I wonder if this is the cork tree. So I walked around and I didn't see any sign relating to our bingo activity. But I pushed on this bark and it does feel kind of like I broke off a piece of it and it looked like cork underneath. So then I pulled my phone out and I Googled cork tree. And it said that the giveaway is its yellow cambium. So I got my knife out and look what I found. Bright yellow cambium, inner bark and cambium underneath the outer bark. So it is a cork tree. I also, the website I was on was actually a Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources site, and they said that it is a banned species in their state because of those seeds that are in those berries. This tree can become invasive. I don't know that it's invasive around here. I don't know how many cork trees we have because, again, I didn't see a sign relating to the bingo game that we're running. And my understanding was that the cork tree in the activity has a sign by it. So either we have 2 cork trees or this is the cork tree, but somebody took the sign away. But if you want to go and see it, it's over in the, it would be the southeast part of Potawatomi Park. So when you're just about, it's up on the hill, it's close to would be the southern border of the park. There's a railroad embankment there from where the Great Western Railroad used to go through town. There's a dead hawthorn tree very near this living cork tree. And I did read that the cork tree has the allelopathic qualities like we talked about with black walnuts a few weeks ago. And I don't know that it killed the hawthorn tree. Hawthorns in general in our area are having a hard time, but if you see the dead hawthorn tree, look south of there and you'll see the quite live cork tree. And I don't know how I feel about it, but it is an interesting, it's a very pretty tree, I'll give you that. And then if you've got a knife or something sharp with you, check out that yellow inner bark layer. That's the giveaway to this species. And keep your eyes open. Maybe there's other cork trees around town that I've just never noticed. But it's something I do want to learn a little bit more about to see just what we've got going there at Potawatomi. So this mainly refers to the next slide. I was walking to work the other day and I was going past Lincoln Park and I saw some activity that I just kept thinking, no, 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 no. We're putting in a new playground at Lincoln Park. And I know I shouldn't bite the hand that feeds me, but I was so surprised. This is at the north side of Lincoln Park. This is the park where we would normally do the concerts in the summertime. There's been a playground there for years and years. The kids at St. Patrick's School, it's now the preschool, they would always come over and play. Apparently it had worn out and it was time for some new playground equipment. But if you've been a longtime participant here at the Good Natured Hour, you'll know that the playground at Lincoln Park is where I would go to get stag. So this is a video I took earlier this summer. The wood chips that were the cushion for the playground equipment at the Lincoln Park playground were loaded with stag beetles and therefore stag beetle eggs and stag beetle larvae. It had kind of been my hope to culture some stag beetle eggs and larvae. I did collect a few. Watch this guy. And this is a male stag beetle. You can tell by the large pinchers here on the front. This was right around the 4th of July that they were coming up. They have spent the last couple of years, it takes them a while to develop, but they're living in these wood chips, feeding on the decomposing actually helping to decompose those wood chips. They're probably the reason why we had to add new wood chips every year. But anyway, I walked over and I looked at this construction site, and they had scraped away every last trace of these wood chips. So that means all of these stag beetles are gone. This was one of the stag beetles. This was from the program that we did in July, where I had collected some. This was a male. This has the smaller pinchers. This was a female. This was my dream. These were some other, these actually turned out to not be stag beetle larvae. This was another type of beetle called a Russian leather beetle. But beetle ecology is just so fascinating, and I really hope to make use of the developing beetles that were down there in that wood chip, ideal wood chip mulch sort of environment that had developed there over the years. And now it is all gone. So I got a little cranky as I walked by there, because one, I didn't, even if I heard that we were going to be replacing that playground this year, I probably would have gone over with a shovel to see how many of these beetles I could rescue in advance of the construction. Is what they did was they pulled out every last bit of those wood chips, and they poured a concrete foundation and a curb, and then I'm sure they'll put some kind of material back in there. Who knows? Maybe they save the wood chips and they'll reuse them. I kind of doubt it, but anyway. So I'm walking through the park after that, and I see that they've also aerated the soil there. And soil aeration is, it's pretty common. We do it on our big turf fields, the athletic fields where people play soccer and football and lacrosse. It's there's nothing inherently wrong with it, but I was just, like I said, I got kind of cranky with the whole, Beetles episode, having all of my little beetle friends going away, that I saw this and I thought, boy, if only we could allow natural aeration. This is a photo of a ground nesting bee. We have a lot of these over at Delnor Woods. We've got a pretty good size. It's not really a colony because these bees are all solitary, but a lot of holes in the ground over at Langham Woods too, which is natural aeration. Instead of doing a mechanical process where you're running an aerator, pulling those plugs up out of the soil, there's a lot of natural organisms, naturally occurring organisms that can do that job for us. And sometimes our park district is just out of touch with things like that. So after that, I cheered up a little bit. I got to work. I remembered I found a cool mushroom the day before, and life was rosy again. But it's just something that we've got our parks department and park operations, and they look at our parks as they've got certain processes for doing things in a very human-centric way. And our little section here of the Parks Department, the Nature Department, we look at things in a completely different way. Instead of running an aerator over the prairie, we'll just wait for the ground-dwelling bees, as well as things like ground squirrels and even moles to do the aeration for us. So with that, I'm going to quit being crabby. I'll let you know what we've got coming up next week. Squirrels and black walnuts. I'm going to take a look at their unique relationship. We're going to keep our eye open for sandhill cranes. When I was up in the UP, they were definitely starting their migration, so they should be coming this way fairly soon. Got another edible fungus we're going to explore. A few weeks ago, I showed you the walking sticks that we have here. It's part of a display that we've had at Hickory Knolls since it opened. And prior to that, I had them with me when I worked at Red Oak Nature Center. So I've got a little update on how our walking sticks are doing. And then, of course, I've got several other little things that have come up, some reader emails, and some other nature news. So anyway, with that, I'll end our screen share, and I'll turn it over to you guys. Does anybody have any questions about what we talked about tonight, or any stories, or anything that you need more information on?
I don't have any stories, but I would like a recipe of some of those mushrooms eating.
Oh, sure. You got it, Silvana. I'll send you, really just sauteing them. Oh, and I should mention too, so the mushroom I found at Potawatomi grew up through the wood chips. And so these mushrooms, they'll be underneath the living part of the organism is underneath the ground. And then they send up their fruiting body, or the spore producing bodies. That's what the mushroom is. And it comes up through the ground. And in the woods, there might be a little bit of dirt, there might be some roots, if there was a plant growing there, but it's a pretty clean mushroom. That mushroom at Potawatomi came up through wood chips. So it took me probably close to an hour to clean it. I was sitting out on my deck with a little paintbrush, and I was just brushing off all the little slivers of wood chips that I could find. So that's not so much a recipe as it is a mushroom hunting tip, that if you can find one growing in the woods as opposed to a parking lot, it's going to be a lot easier to clean. But yeah, sauteing them in oil. I usually do butter and then a little bit of olive oil, and I just cook them for maybe, 5 or 6 minutes. You don't want to get them too tough. Sometimes I'll throw a little garlic in there. I'll have a recipe next week too for the fungus we're going to talk about. But yeah, I'll send you a couple of websites. Okay, Silvana? Anybody else? If not, I haven't had supper yet, so I'm going to go home and have some mushrooms. Appreciate y'all signing in tonight, and I'll look forward to seeing y'all next week.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Pam.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, guys.